Adesso ho il piacere di invitare alla prossima relazione la signora Adriane Boag, che è una progettista dei programmi museali alla National Gallery of Australia, Canberra. Prego.
Thank you very much. I wanted to really start my presentation by thanking all of you, and Christina in particular, for the invitation to participate. Okay, can you hear me okay? Yeah, sorry. For this opportunity to participate in cities, museums and Alzheimer's here in Florence. I'm going to divide my talk today into three parts. I'm firstly going to talk a little bit about the background of the program at the National Gallery of Australia, how it started and how it developed. Then I'm going to outline our outreach program, which includes our training workshops. And lastly, I want to talk a little bit about the value of beauty, about the potential future impact of programs in art galleries, programs based on the visual arts for people living with dementia. But firstly, I want to really start by telling you a little bit about where I come from. Few people probably know that Canberra, the city where the National Gallery of Australia is situated, is the capital of Australia. It's a small inland city, a little bit bigger than Florence. But unlike Florence, which is filled with, which is very densely packed, Canberra is a huge sort of sprawling city, perhaps more on the American model than on a European model. The capital is very new. It really began to be created in 1911, and the National Gallery of Australia opened in 1982. The gallery itself is situated in a very particular part of the city called the Parliamentary Triangle, a place devoted to government. And around us are mostly government buildings, huge government buildings, a bit like the National Gallery itself, then with huge swathes of grass and trees in between. So when I was reading the Mourinho Marini publication, and we were talking about the piazza, bringing people together, the museum sort of forming the core of a community, in Canberra at the National Gallery of Australia, we have to work very hard to bring people to the museum. However, it is the premier visual arts institution in Australia, and many visitors are tourists, and many locals only come for the major exhibitions. The Art and Dementia program, which began in 2007, the beginning of 2007, however, has had a broad impact on the gallery overall, from the director to the staff, but also then a national and even, I would say, an international impact. And the National Gallery of Australia is known as a dementia-friendly community. Participants in the program spontaneously say, you know, from the moment I walk through the door, I feel welcome. Everybody knows us, everybody smiles, we're understood. So we have a collection of over 100,000 works of art, but perhaps only ever 2,000 on display. The main areas of the collection are from Southeast Asia, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander art, European and post-1945 American modernism, and Australian art. So, as I mentioned, the gallery was I suppose these are just some views of the gallery spaces, and you can see that there are these large spaces, and with all of these photographs, not all that many people in the gallery. We would perhaps have 1,000 visitors a day. But it means that there's lots of space. You can see perhaps a little bit of the depth of the collection. So it's perhaps one of the only places in Australia where you can really talk about the history of modernism. And for those of you obsessed with the visual arts, as I am, you might find that significant. So the program was established in 2007, but it really took us a year of discussion to get up the courage, and I suppose to build our knowledge, to embark into a field about which very few of us knew anything. The people on staff who had a health background were particularly tentative and nervous about starting a program in a gallery for people with dementia. And we began very much under the guidance of a clinical psychologist, a man called Dr. Mike Bird, and the Art and Dementia program was just a small portion of the overall access program for people who are deaf, for people with vision impairment, for people with disabilities, both intellectual and physical. And it fits under that umbrella, which I think everyone here has talked about today as well, of social inclusion. So we began with a 6-week pilot program. 4 different groups came to the gallery, and the groups, initial groups of people were selected by the clinical psychologist because of their various presentations of dementia. So we were on a very steep learning curve. But what this pilot program did, it was set up our partnerships with the healthcare sector in Canberra. And in all of the work that we do, I think it's really important to recognise that you can't do this work without partnerships. A gallery that tries, I think, to run an art and dementia program in isolation is almost doomed with failure. So partnerships, your relationship with your partners, and that kind of continual maintenance of your partner relationships has been incredibly important. That 6-week pilot program really demonstrated the impact on the participants, who were just 16 in total. But they strongly reported at the end of the 6 weeks their desire for the program to continue. They said things that they felt intelligent again. They enjoyed the opportunity to socialise, to share, for self-expression and creativity. And these are all themes that other speakers have touched on. And the pilot program and the subsequent evaluation which came out of that pilot program really contributed to the development of the aims of our program overall. This evaluation was published in 2009 in the international journal Ageing and Mental Health, if any of you are interested. And really, the executive summary outlines the values of interventions for people living with dementia that support normal, higher level activities. And you'll see that the last 2 points on the slide really talk about community awareness. And I think also you talked about stigma and you know, how when we began the program, I suppose we were given a list as long as our arms of all of the things that we shouldn't do. You can't do this with people with dementia. You can't show people with dementia these things. You can't talk about that. And slowly, over the 10 years of our program, we have really pretty much done everything that we're told we couldn't do. And in the meantime, I would really say that the greater field has caught up, or not caught up, but that a lot of the things that we talk about are also now much more reflected in the broader community. So initially our program was very much conversation-based. Small groups between 4 and 6 participants with the same educators, the same participants and the same carers. This program on site started very small. However, by 2016, during 2016, we delivered 161 tours at the National Gallery of Australia. We now have 8 educators who are trained to deliver the tours, and overall, 78 different people participated in the program. So that's been a huge increase. You know, if you think of the pilot program, just 16 people. And at the moment, we're working in a 3-year phase, 2015 and 2018, because we have received kind of additional support, financial support. We're constantly evaluating, thinking about the program, seeking new partners and thinking about really where we want to go. And in 2015, a local residential aged care facility provided us with funding for the on-site program, but also for the delivery of our outreach program. And with that partnership came a change of name. So originally our program was called Art and Alzheimer's, and in 2015 we changed that name to Art and Dementia to reflect more broadly the field and the symptoms and effects of dementia. This is a lot of information on this slide, but it really just states the variety of the program that we deliver on site. So for people who are still living at home, perhaps with the early stage dementia, for people with more advanced dementias, for people with dementia to share for their carers, and also art making. We also work closely with this residential care facility, both at the gallery and also off-site. We deliver workshops there, and as well as them coming to the gallery. And we have 30 iPads at the gallery, and we found the use of the iPads and the support of the iPads in the gallery incredibly useful. It wasn't until 2014 that we were able to extend the program to include art making. And the iPads, not only using traditional art making materials, but also digital technology, has just been very positive. But again, we've relied very strongly on our partners to deliver the art making workshop, because I'm not sure how you find this in Europe, but in Australia, the resources required in the gallery to successfully deliver art making are huge. Already our program is very costly. One educator, one support worker, 4 or 5 people with dementia, professional carer. But with art making, we found we needed, one educator, maybe 2 or 3 people with dementia. And it was simply beyond our reach to deliver that kind of workshop on site. So this is a map of Australia, and I think the National Gallery of Australia is down on the southeast. You can see that it's quite, well, you can't really see how big the country is, but we have done a lot of travel, and we've delivered a very hands-on 2-day training workshop in over 30 galleries around Australia. Each of these workshops has around 25 participants, both arts and health professionals. We need about 2 to 3 months lead time, because setting up the right conditions for the community to really implement a sustainable program for people living with dementia, we have found takes a lot of time. We want our workshops to be effective. We want the workshop to actually bring results for that community. We want that community at the end of that 2-day workshop to be in a position they have the partners set up, they have barriers already broken down about people with dementia visiting the gallery, and that they can then embark perhaps on their own pilot program. This is partly why our program at the National Gallery of Australia is so broad, so that we can share as much kind of experience of what works and what doesn't work within this training workshop. We also work with Alzheimer's Australia to provide that kind of medical background to dementia. And we found that the support of local councils has been really critical in the development of the continuing success of regional art and dementia programs. So for many galleries, this is still a new type of program. And the impetus quite often might come from outside the gallery. But what we have found that unless the gallery takes the lead, unless the gallery really truly embraces what the idea is, sometimes a gallery perhaps thinks, those people from Canberra, they can come in, they'll deliver the workshop, and then they'll go away, and we won't have to worry about it so much. But of course, they have a lot of pressure from the community to implement the programs. And so this is partly why we spend a lot of time in the lead up to the delivery of the workshop, making sure that those conditions in each community are sort of right for something to happen. And also then to identify who in the gallery, and preferably a paid staff member, is actually going to deliver the program. So many small galleries in Australia are mainly run with volunteer educators. But for a volunteer to really implement and to push a program like this in a gallery, it's very difficult. And so we are always looking to make that connection where the gallery actually invests financially into the program going forward. So in Australia, we've seen a great deal of diversity in the range of programs that are developed. In fact, some galleries follow much more the Meet Me at MoMA model. Some galleries do more similar to what small groups, discussion groups that we do at the NGA. Some galleries just do art making. And we just try and support what will be sustainable in that community. We don't go into these training workshops saying you need to do what we're doing, because as a huge institution, with 250 staff members, you can't expect the same kind of work to be done. In 2012, we held a national seminar where we brought all of the people together who had participated in our workshops together, and then later this year, we're going to do that for a second time. So the workshops are 2 days, and often galleries say, what on earth could we possibly do for 2 days? They're very practically based, but the really key learning for each day of that workshop is a demonstration tour. So before we go to that gallery, we set up with a local dementia care provider that they will bring a group of people with dementia to the gallery. And usually myself will take that group of people on a tour in that gallery with their works of art, with their chairs, with their stairs or ramps or, toilets miles away, all of those things, so that you demonstrate in a very practical way some of the problems that might arise, but also what that delivery is about. And then that is really reinforced with sort of a communication component of the workshop. The demonstration tour, starting right from the greeting of people at the door, the selection of the works of art, the style of discussion, the role of the carers, the farewell, all of those are modelled through that demonstration tour. And we found that a really critical and important learning tool. On the second day of the workshop, another demonstration tour occurs. Same works of art, same educator, different group of people. And so then immediately you have this point of comparison. The first day, the demonstration tour might go so well that everybody thinks that's easy. Yep, I can do that. And then on the second day, nobody will speak. Somebody falls asleep, somebody gets up and wanders away, and then they go, oh, it's maybe a little bit more difficult. And so we found that the 2 demonstration tours are really critical. So the majority of the workshop after the demonstration tours is spent on this idea of communication, language, listening, body language, but also silence, that ability to sit back and to be quiet. We also spend quite a lot of time analysing works of art. It's amazing, I think, how often in a museum we privilege words over what we can see. And so we talk about, observation. We spend time looking, describing a work of art, and how that then can lead to interpretation and connection. For many gallery professionals, this is very challenging. They are not the expert. They're not imparting all of their knowledge. It's not about them. So this idea that the whole tour is about your audience. The more you speak in a tour for people with dementia, the less successful, I say, your tour would be. But, that takes a lot of practice and a lot of skill. So getting gallery professionals to understand this kind of new role, but also encouraging them to be much more self-disciplined and reflective about the kinds of language they use can be surprisingly difficult. However, it's through our experience of people living with dementia, you know, the hundreds and hundreds of hours we've spent with people living with dementia in the gallery, that we've really made some of our greatest discoveries. And now, you know, I think if we work in museums, we all hope that, you know, visiting a gallery is a big experience. We've talked this morning about that idea of transformation. We are already converted, but how do you get people visiting a gallery to also feel the same sense of enjoyment, to gain the kind of new perspectives on the visual arts that they may get in their everyday lives? This is a very favourite object of mine in Australia. It's called the Big Pineapple. It's in Queensland, because that's a place they grow pineapples. But, you know, I remember going here as a child, and I remember how exciting it was, you know, going in, climbing up, looking down. And I suppose that's in some ways what we're trying to, in a community-wide sense, we're trying to actually get our communities to understand that visiting an art gallery can be just as accessible, just as easy, just as exciting as these kinds of experiences that people think are miles away. Unfortunately, you can see from this photograph of the National Gallery of Australia, which is this huge brutalist building designed in the 1970s, that we have a bit of trouble looking quite so appealing and fun. However, every now and again, we have an exhibition which is truly immersive. And in 2013 or so, we had a very large exhibition of the American artist James Turrell, made up of these huge light installations. And we took our groups of people with dementia into spaces like this, which are incredibly visually disorienting. And we let them bask in the glow of this unbelievable light. And one and all, they needed a lot of support and holding of hands at times, but they found it incredibly exciting, incredibly uplifting and joyful. However, most of our gallery spaces and exhibitions are more like this. And sometimes a way to kind of, I want to talk a little bit about the value of that kind of joy and beauty in our lives. But, and I suppose the direction that the gallery is moving in at the moment, especially with our partner in aged care, is this thinking about how can the experience in the gallery begin to have an impact on that aged care facility? How can the heightened aesthetic awareness on the discussion of beauty and the visual arts that happens in the gallery, how can that be extended back into the care environment? How can we encourage the staff from the care facility, our partners, how can we encourage them to begin to value more the things that their residents, I'm going to skip along here because we're over time, the things that their residents touch and look at and are surrounded by. And I think that this idea came to me with a group of people looking at this lamp on the left-hand side. And a woman said to me, if I had a lamp like that, people would have a reason to come to my room. We would have something to talk about and we could sit in its glow. And I just felt intensely moved by her recognition that the environment that she was living in was probably filled with objects which were standardized, which were practical, which were good for wiping down or moving around, but which had very little aesthetic appeal, which had very little beauty, intrinsic beauty. And I think that this is an area that I'm really kind of interested in supporting and encouraging our partners to begin to think about. I'm going to just skip through these last few slides. And this is just a slide which just shows us some of the kind of insights that people with dementia have. But I wanted to talk about this idea of, I suppose, our ability to influence. You know, in a gallery, I'm sure all of you can relate to and identify that idea that Mary, here in the photograph, you know, one day one of her carers said to me, you know, I've been looking after Mary for 3 years, but yet she's never told me that about her sister. And so our project now at the National Gallery on site is this idea of perhaps extending our dementia-friendly community in the gallery further than just our building, extending it into the care homes and into the larger environment. And perhaps supporting people's understandings of the value, not only of the visual arts for people living with dementia, but the value of the visual arts in their own lives as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Adriane, for your talk. And thank you for coming from so far to tell us about your workshop with people with dementia and to give us a nice overview on what is the situation in galleries and museums in Australia. So thank you so much. Abbiamo finito la nostra sessione della mattina, abbiamo un coffee break e vi rinvito però qui alle 11:45. Che ore sono? Abbiamo un quarto d'ora, dove ci sarà la tavola rotonda tenuta da Michele Farina, giornalista del Corriere della Sera. Quindi ci rivediamo fra un quarto d'ora. Grazie a tutti.